You ever been pushed to your limit, where you know it's time to take action, and you do it in a way that nobody saw coming? That's what happened to me. Let me take you back to the morning it all went down. It was 5:48 a.m. on a Thursday in late September. The air was still cool, the kind of crisp morning that made you feel like fall was finally taking over. I walked down that gravel path, my boots crunching on the loose stones, heading to the dam control house. It was my routine. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other, and I was ready to deal with something that had been on my mind for 14 months. I unlocked the door to the control house, a small, concrete building that sat at the southern end of Harrow Lake. I'd spent 19 years maintaining the lake's water levels, making adjustments when the seasons changed, and getting ready for when the water had to drop. I knew the dam inside out, every lever, every valve. I could have done it with my eyes closed. I set my coffee down, looked at the control panel, and turned the release valve. There was no dramatic moment, no splash of water like you see in the movies. The gate just lifted with a low groan, and the water slowly started to flow out of the lake. Harrow Lake, 19 acres of private water that I owned, began to drop. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send any warnings. I didn't even leave a note. I just sat back down on my porch and watched. I knew what was coming. By 8 a.m., the lake had dropped 3 inches, and the first changes were visible. The HOA's docks, the 16 of them they had built without asking me, were sitting lower in the water, barely hanging on to their pilings. By noon, the lake had dropped another 11 inches. 3 of the cabin lots on the lower end were flooded, the water creeping dangerously close to the foundations. I sat there, taking it all in. The HOA had been building these vacation cabins on my shoreline for the last 14 months. They'd installed docks without my permission, and all of it was happening on my land. I knew I wasn't the only one watching. Douglas Farray, the HOA's president, started calling me. First at 2:04 p.m., then 2:31, 3:17, and again at 4:02, then at 5:45, 6:14, and 6:30. 7 calls in total, and I answered none of them. This had all started a year earlier, when I got that letter from the HOA about their new development. I'd called my lawyer, Margaret Voss, who read through the 1987 easement, and told me something that stuck with me. Say nothing. Let them build. I did just that. I saved the letter, took photos of everything, and waited. The 1987 easement was clear. It allowed the HOA members to use the lake for recreational purposes, but it explicitly prohibited any construction. I had all the evidence I needed, and I wasn't going to let them get away with this. 14 months passed, and I watched them build. Every cabin, every dock, every foundation. It was all happening on my land, and I had it all documented. Photos, letters, surveys, everything. When the construction started, I made sure to document every single step. They thought they could do whatever they wanted, but they didn't count on one thing. I wasn't just sitting by and watching. By the end of the summer, 139 cabins were built, and the shoreline looked like a damn resort. The HOA sent letters telling me how successful the project had been, bragging about how they were creating a premier vacation destination. I kept every letter, every photo, and added them to my growing binder. I didn't need to react. I just needed to wait. In September, with all 139 cabins completed and occupied, I made my move. The gates were open, and the lake was dropping. I filed the complaint in court. Margaret took care of the paperwork, the legal filings, and the evidence. When everything was ready, we filed it all. It was over for them. That morning, Douglas called me again. And again. And again. He didn't know what was happening, but he sure as hell knew something was wrong. When the complaint was filed, the truth started to spread through the cabin owner community like wildfire. People started calling each other, asking questions. What was happening to the lake? Why was it dropping? Who the hell was Elliot Crane? The community meeting was called, and Douglas did his best to spin the situation, claiming it was all just a misunderstanding. But the cabin owners weren't buying it. They'd read the complaint. They knew what was coming. I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. By the time Douglas brought in outside attorneys and tried to explain everything away, it was too late. The damage had been done. The 61 trespassing cabins, the 78 illegal structures, the docks, all of it was documented, and it was all there in the court records. Douglas resigned. The HOA's board had to face the reality of what they had done. They tried to negotiate, but it was clear they had no ground to stand on. The settlement talks were quick. In the end, they agreed to pay for the legal fees, the remediation fund, and to fix the boundaries. As for me, I watched it all unfold from my porch. The lake, the 139 cabins, the people who thought they had bought something they didn't deserve. They had no idea that the man they had been ignoring for months was the one who held the power the entire time. It was over, but not just for them. For me too. I had spent 19 years building something on that land, and no one, no HOA, no developer, no one was going to take it from me. I wasn't just protecting a piece of property. I was protecting my rights, my water, my legacy. What's your take on this? Do you think I did the right thing, or should I have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to share this story if you've ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours. The fallout from the settlement was nothing short of dramatic. The once proud HOA board had to face the reality that their grand vacation cabin development had crumbled under the weight of legal facts. And those 139 cabin owners, most of them just looking for a quiet getaway by the lake, had no idea how much of their investment was in jeopardy. For them, it was a bitter pill to swallow. I could almost hear the disbelief in their voices as they made the calls to the HOA office, asking, "What do you mean the cabins aren't legal?" It didn't take long for the truth to spread like wildfire. Some of the cabin owners, the ones who had actually read the complaint before attending that emergency community meeting, were already way ahead of the curve. These were the ones who understood what was happening. They were the ones who saw the writing on the wall before the HOA had even admitted their mistake. Others? They were in denial, trying to figure out how they could fight back. Douglas, on the other hand, was a man in deep denial himself. He had always been the face of the HOA's leadership, confident, smooth-talking, and convinced that his authority couldn't be challenged. But now, faced with overwhelming evidence and a community turning against him, he was scrambling to find some way out. It's amazing how quickly someone like that can go from hero to villain. I'll tell you something, I had always believed that doing the right thing doesn't always get the applause, but it will get you the result you deserve. And sure enough, as the weeks wore on, it became clear that the settlement agreement we had crafted was the key to unraveling everything the HOA had worked for. They had to pay, and they had to face the consequences of their actions. I sat back and watched, the sound of my coffee cup setting down on the porch railing echoing in the quiet of the evening. The lake was calm again. The docks that had once sat lower in the water were back where they belonged. The cabins, as shiny and new as they were, now had to live with the knowledge that they were built on land that the HOA had no legal right to develop. The lawsuit was filed, the settlement agreed upon, and the HOA, well, they had to pick up the pieces of their shattered reputation. As for me, I wasn't gloating, I wasn't rubbing their faces in it, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The land I owned, the water I managed, everything was protected. Everything was right again. And now, it was about making sure that no one else ever tried to overstep like they had. I think back to that one pivotal moment, opening those gates and letting the water flow. It wasn't just a metaphor for what happened next. It was the start of a legal domino effect. It was when I took back control, quietly, calmly, and in a way that nobody expected. But that's the thing about power. You don't always have to wield it loudly. Sometimes, you just need to let it run its course. And as I sat there, watching the golden light fade over the lake, I couldn't help but wonder, what happens next? The cabins are still there, the land is still mine, but what about the people who bought in good faith, thinking they had the HOA's blessing? Can you really blame them for being upset? The truth is, I didn't want to cause harm to anyone, but the law was on my side. The HOA had crossed a line, and in the end, they had to face the consequences of their actions. But as the settlement unfolded, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. In some ways, it was just the beginning. So here we are. The lake is at peace again. The land is secure. But there's always the question of fairness, right? Was it fair to let things escalate to the point where people's investments were at risk? Or was I simply standing up for what I had every right to protect? What do you think? Do you think I should have approached it differently? Do the cabin owners have a right to be upset? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on it. And hey, if you've ever faced a similar situation where you had to stand your ground, share your story too. We all need to hear it.